Welcome all. Thank you everyone for joining us today for one of our revitalised podcasts that we're doing. For those of you that know us quite well, we do our webinars every single month, which is a little bit more formal. We've decided that we're going to kick off doing our podcast again, which is a bit more informal, a bit more conversational, but hopefully gives you a little bit more benefit and a bit more insight into certain specific areas and certain things that we're looking at. I'm Jordan Brown. I'm Head of Consultancy here at Pennington Choices, and today I've been joined by Stewart Kerr.
Hi everyone, Stewart Kerr, Principal Consultant at Pennington Choices. Nice to be here.
So we're going to be talking about building safety in particular today, which is your area of expertise. Yes?
Yes, definitely.
You're going to lead me by the hand a little bit with this through here as well. So I suppose just a bit of a brief introduction then around building safety, the kind of things you get involved in and kind of what clients and what housing providers kind of need to know a bit about it, I suppose. Not too in depth because we could be here a long time otherwise.
Yeah, we certainly would be. Building safety. I mean, we all know about the Grenfell tragedy and the fact that that's brought around a lot of changes and it certainly highlighted a lot of things that were not necessarily correct within certain industries that were all around housing, particularly social housing, but more so also even in the private sectors. So we've had the Hackett report, and we've had the Building Safety Act, and we've had the Building Safety Regulator and various regulations that have come in. And organisations have had to be quite quick at trying to get to where they need to be with the various regulations that now sit upon them. And it's a very, very tough task. It's a very grey area for a lot of organisations. There's aspects that are very new and not well understood as well. And there are things that they weren't doing, which includes costs, resource, and so forth. That means they're now under a lot of strain to actually meet the requirements. And then on top of this, they still have to provide safe properties, safe homes, both in terms of a structural and a fire safety aspect. So there's a whole myriad of things that we have come across with various organisations. Lots of common themes in there, but also lots of nuance between organisations, because even though one social housing provider will have similar way the organisation is set up to another, the bits in between, how they operate and so forth, can have big impacts on how they're managing
interconnectivity of teams and kind of works and servicing and all the other stuff that comes along with it as well.
And we've been into organisations and we've highlighted lots of different aspects about how they operate, and there's been lots of interesting points of discussion with them, particularly in terms of silo working, disconnection of services, disconnection between the senior managers and the operational teams as well, in the direction of travel on how they want to do it, because the leadership team know they've got to do building safety, and then the operational team know that they've got to do it this way to get there, and the two don't necessarily always meet up, so there's a disconnect. So we've found lots and lots of different areas that needs to be improved upon, but one of the biggest things that organisations have tried to get their head around and not necessarily done as well as others is structural safety. So fire safety, very easy. Fire risk assessment, get your actions, do the work you need to do. That's the very basic stuff. Whereas structural safety, it was very much a new thing for the industry to try and understand what does this mean. And one organisation's response was, well, the building stood up. It's still stood up. What more do we need to have a look at? And it was going beyond that to help them understand, well, the regulator needs to have that assurance
piece,
and that's the big piece, because the regulator, and I say this to all clients, the regulator has never met you, they don't know your buildings, and they do not know how you operate. So when you do the building safety case report, which is the key piece of documentation that they review to give your building assessment certificate for your building, they want that assurance to come out of that document without them having to have lots of questions, lots of requests for information, which is what a lot of organisations have had, and structure's been a big part of that. Lots and lots of requests for further information around structure. So getting an organisation and explaining to them and supporting them in saying, you need to know what is your structure in the first place. Does it have any historical or known issues that you need to be aware of? How are you managing it on a day-to-day basis? So are you doing, because everybody does, you'll have people walking the building all the time. Is it documented as that evidence? Because you telling me, we look at the building all the time and we check that if anything's fallen off and so forth, doesn't mean that you are convincing me of assurance, because you've got no evidence to back it up. that'll be me taking your word on it, and the regulator will not do
So
that.
moving from a reassurance to an assurance piece.
Exactly that. So it's and then if you do have structural issues, what are you doing about them? What's the mitigation you're putting in place? Does it have an impact on the evacuation strategy? It's a whole new concept to organisations, and there's been a lot of that as well. And the rate of change has caught a lot of organisations off guard. They weren't aware of, even though Grenfell was 2017, so we're 8 years down the line now, organisations have not necessarily been able to keep up with the pace of change. They've been waiting a lot as well, waiting for the guidance to come down, and the guidance hasn't necessarily been coming from the regulator in a meaningful way. There is lots and lots of guidance out there, but it doesn't necessarily explain to an organisation what they need to do.
Translates that operational delivery. I mean, I must admit, I'm an asset person. That's my background, kind of 20 plus years in terms of working in it, and I still can't get my head around it sometimes. So I understand the principles of it, I understand some of the requirements of it that it goes through, but it does feel very much around, and we do come across clients like this that even with really good individuals and really good teams delivering really, really great work, bringing all that together into a building safety case, a building safety case report for the regulator can be challenging, because as you say, it's around making sure that you can evidence what you've put together. It's your pack that says to the building safety regulator that this building is safe for occupation. People can live here, and this is what's in place to keep them safe as part of that as well.
Absolutely.
So we've done that for a lot of clients through there as well, and we've been, I suppose, a bit of good news from us from our point, but we've had our first building safety case back for one of our clients that we've done.
Yes, we have, yeah. So we put together a safety case for a client based out of Salford, and we worked with them to get them together, because again, what a lot of organisations have struggled with is how the building safety is, like you say, it encompasses almost everything about an organisation into one place. Whereas before you had housing over here and environmentals over here and investment and planning over here and repairs somewhere else as well, and compliance sat in a cupboard somewhere else completely. So we worked with the client to make sure that we were pulling all that information together, because like I say, what we have to do is to get over to the regulator that we understand the building, we understand the residents, we understand how this building is managed and operated, but more importantly, we understand what the risks are as well. So we did a thorough document review of all the documentation that the client had, and this building as well was very, very complex. It sat next to a shopping outlet, it was above a gym and a set of offices as well, and it had combustible cladding on it as well. And whilst we were doing the safety case report, the cladding was actually being replaced at the time. So there was a lot of complexities around this building, and it was fully leasehold as well. Which added more to it. So they weren't a social housing provider, they were a private housing provider with a managing agent. So there was a complexity as well within there. So we did a thorough document review with them, and then we sat down with our key lines of inquiry, and this helps support them in understanding what we're trying to get out, because we ask them various questions which clarify on the information they've provided. It also helps us understand how their approach works and if there are any gaps, and it also helps us to develop an action plan for the client at the end that they can then take away and say, right, this is what we need to do. Some of the bits we will be able to support them with, and some bits they just will need to do themselves, and have that documentation as that evidence. And we base all of this around the claim argument evidence framework, where the claim is always going to be that this building is safe to occupy, and then we will argue that case because we have these various bits of evidence, and we have which supports all of that argument to support the claim.
So that assurance document piece that comes in.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
I think it was really interesting that point you made there around kind of the cladding was coming off while you were putting this together, because again, I think there is, maybe not everywhere, but there is a little myth sometimes, I suppose, that it is a static document, I suppose, in some respects. This is a safety case as this building is safe today. Actually, obviously not true that. This is a live document that organisations need to manage, keep up to date, make sure, again, fits in various different departments within organisations they need to keep up to date, and that can be a challenge for organisations as well.
It is, and we talk about this with all of our clients, and I have this little saying to the client saying, we will do the safety case report and we'll put it all together for you. When I hand that over to you, that becomes your baby. And like any baby, you need to make sure that it is looked after, that
It's
it is
fed
cared for,
and
with the safety case report, that it is kept up to date. It's a live document, because the regulator can call you up at any time. Although a building assessment certificate lasts for 5 years, doesn't mean that they won't call you up after 1 year, 2 year, or so many years to have it reassessed as well. Yeah, and especially if there's an incident, or if there's something that happens in the wider industry and you have that particular type of building, such as like a large panel system, or if it's something that sits, say, on a car park where there are EV chargers, for example. All of these things can change the whole landscape of how the building safety regulator will look at different safety case reports, or what they will draw upon. So there's lots of things in there. So you have to make sure that you've got the right things in place to manage this safety case report once it becomes a live document. And that again is adding to the organisation for things that so many years ago didn't exist, because there was no call for this, because it was very much the Grenfell disaster was never going to happen, sort of idea. But it has happened. Organisations do need to understand what they need to do to manage this, and then they need to put the right things in place. Some organisations can do it very easily because they are big organisations with lots of resource, lots of people. Others, such as resident tenancy management organisations, which might be 3 or 4 directors, with a managing agent just doing the various bits and bobs, it's going to be much more difficult. But it doesn't remove them from the fact that they still need to demonstrate how the building is safe and how they're managing it safely.
I think as well, when you get into those mixed tenure blocks as well, especially if you don't own some of those properties and they're kind of private rented, if you're in social housing or leaseholds, as we talked about before as well, and kind of getting your head around that accountable person and principal accountable person, and understanding what your remit is as the landlord or the building owner in pulling that together, and what you're expected to do if you're not the principal accountable person, but just an accountable person in a building as well. I suppose a wider question from me, I mean, we find challenges within organisations. You've touched on this a fair bit around, this is new. Although kind of Grenfell was a number of years ago now, we're in a situation where kind of the requirements of the Building Safety Regulator and the Building Safety Act is different to what we have done traditionally in housing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, etc. And I know at the start of all this, there was a bit of a call for I think it was the Building Safety Manager role, wasn't it, that was going to be kind of a requirement for organisations. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing when I go into organisations is not in a negative way, probably a lack of understanding sometimes around the role is no longer there, but the requirements of that role are still there. And I still think there's some challenges for organisations to get their head around how they pull all this together. Data is obviously a big one for organisations as well. What do you find is the biggest challenge when working with organisations? What's the biggest barriers you come across with organisations?
The biggest barriers that we generally find are it's sort of twofold. It's having the right people in the right places, and it's exactly like you say. Yeah, the Building Safety Manager was a role that was actually prescribed in the original. Building Safety Act before it became law. But Michael Gove at the time had that element removed, because they realised that for some organisation a building safety manager would be too onerous. But the responsibilities and the requirements are still there. It's just not under a prescribed role anymore. Yeah. So organisations need to demonstrate that those requirements are being carried out by whomever it might be within the organisation. So it's making sure that they've got that. We often talk about having do you have a building safety training matrix? Do you look at BS 8673 to see if you've got that framework in place? Does it work? Are there gaps? What are you doing to fulfil those gaps? Because that building safety manager role was a bit of a unicorn. People didn't exist. So it was one of the good reasons why they did remove it. But that doesn't mean that organisations shouldn't be striving to get people up to the required level where they are competent. And that is a big word that rolls around building safety a lot, is competency. So organisations have got competent people to be managing the areas that they are responsible for. And if they are, and if they're not competent at this point, what does competency look like? And that's where the training needs analysis comes into it, and a training matrix of roles, identifying what needs to be within each role, will support an organisation into getting to where they need to be. Because that is as important as having the set of documents, the policies, the procedures. is the people who are going to be carrying out those roles. So yeah, it is a challenge. And then further to that, one of the biggest challenges is about resident engagement. It is such a massive area, and every organisation to a degree was always, oh yeah, we discuss things with our residents and so forth. But I think one of the things that came out of Grenfell very, very prominently was the fact that the residents were not being listened to during that refurbishment, for their concerns about what was going off and so forth. And Hackett said that was one of the key roles. So now you have the resident engagement strategy. But that, again, is not a document to just be done to tick a box as such. It's there to be how the organisation is going to engage with our residents. How do we understand what our residents are? And residents are a very mixed bag. I know this from my time in social housing. You'll got very vocal ones, and you'll know this from your time as well. Yeah, we'll have very vocal ones, and then we'll have people who just do not want to engage whatsoever. But there has to be some common ground somewhere between the organisation and the resident, and that's one thing that needed to be picked up.
I think it's important that as well. One of the things we talk to clients around, not just for building safety, but in kind of all aspects of asset management, housing management, regulator of social housing as well, is that meaningful resident engagement. I think we've moved away as a sector, or I'd like to think we are moving away from a sector of, as you say, maybe a quarterly meeting where we sit down and have a chat and tell them about some of the problems and issues, and tends to turn into a repairs-a-thon, where kind of residents just throw loads of repairs at you as well. And it's about making sure that kind of whatever you put in place is meaningful and informs change and informs kind of what you do, whether it's the building, whether it's from the Building Safety Act or whether it's for the regulator of social housing, because it informs everywhere. We need to be into a position more where we have that meaningful engagement with residents, and kind of the second part of that, I suppose, is what we've just talked about before, is that assurance piece, being able to demonstrate we've had that meaningful consultation, we've had that meaningful input from residents, and we can demonstrate how it shaped our services and deliver things as well.
And the organisations as well need to have to understand that resident engagement comes from so many different aspects. And when you have high-rise buildings, the impacts can be quite significant if you don't engage in the right ways. So where housing are doing whatever they need to do, if they're having ASB, if they're having complaints, it's that making sure that ties in with building safety as well. Environmental, if they're changing, say, caretaking practices and so forth, which could have impacts with the residents in terms of how blocks are cleaned and so forth, but adversely could also impact building safety in the fact that caretaker, for example, might be the one doing the fire alarm testing, and if that's going to change, how does that make any difference to what needs to be done on site in terms of safety? So it's a very big piece, and building safety just does cover all of it like a big umbrella, essentially.
I think one of the things I've found when working with organisations around building safety in particular is where it doesn't work. And I understand that kind of housing providers are bigger and smaller. Some have thousands of employees, some have 10 employees. We've done a couple of organisations with less than 10 employees. But actually, having somebody in the organisation that it's not a bolt-on. Doesn't feel like a bolt-on job in terms of you do this or this fits quite. Fire's normally a pretty good one, or compliance manager that has this kind of bolted onto their job title. It's a very complex world that you need to get right, and you can't just shoehorn it in somewhere as well. On that note though, and talking about that, I mean, we've talked about the kind of the work that we've done with organisations and the things that we've put together and help support them on and develop them. There's two folds to that, I suppose, for us. We help obviously put these together for organisations, but we also help train them to understand what goes in, what should be in there, what they should be looking for, how they manage it moving forward, and bringing that in. I suppose in terms of putting that together, you mentioned before around the one that we've had recently. I'll mention it again, and a nice good shout out for it as well. Was there anything specific in there that we found was really good that kind of came up? What would the building safety regulator say about that one in particular for us?
So the one that we had recently was around the gateway processes, and that has also been a huge piece of work that organisations have to take on, because it's a totally different way of working now. Before, planning went into local planning, but the regulator is now the building control for high-risk buildings. So, and the levels of detail that has to be gone into to get through an application is quite significantly different to what it used to be before. So yeah, that webinar, it highlighted some of the things that were going off. I put the scenario to the regulator there, who was from the building control side, around the replacement of a fire door on a flat that had been kicked in for welfare purposes or whatever it might be, but it was a compromised fire door. And does that sit under regularisation work as an emergency, or does it sit under a full gateway application under Cat B works? And even the regulator at the time didn't actually know. They had to come back to us and they had to say that we believe that it is a regularisation. But even then, there was still an element of, we're not entirely working our way through this either. We don't have all the answers. So there's a lot of learning from both sides of things, and there's even more information and guidance coming out. We've now got residential PEEPs, which we're doing training with for clients now, because that is a new piece about what does that mean, what does it look like, how does it work, what are we going to have to do, because it is going to be a mandatory piece of regulation that if you are found not to be providing this for your residents, you can receive enforcement from the Fire and Rescue Service or the London Fire Brigade if you're in London. So there's the changing of the landscape is forever going on still, whilst even though we are 3, 4, 5 years into it. So there's still so much that organisations still need to understand and take on, and then actually bring in so that they can demonstrate again how they are managing these buildings safely.
I think it's probably an opportune time there. I'm going to cut it short in a moment. But our next podcast, so we are going to do that one. That's on our peeps, isn't it, I believe?
Yeah, it is, yeah. We're going to be looking at our peeps as well, yeah. And just trying to dispel a few myths around it, looking at the fact sheet that's been released as well, and also about what best practice sort of looks like around that as well, because it is still very much a grey area, and organisations will be, particularly smaller ones, will be, how do we do this?
How do we manage it? How do we build them? Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today.
No,
thank you for that. I've enjoyed that. I've learned an awful lot as well as I've gone through. For yourselves listening to this, as I say, we're going to do more podcasts. A couple more of these are going to come out. If you've got any specific suggestions or anything you'd like us to have a chat about, a bit more informal or a bit more in depth as part of this, please drop an email over to if you go to our website, there's a contact us form there where you can send it through to us. If you've not signed up for our webinars as well, which are a bit more formalised, we have guest speakers coming in. We do one of them every month. They're free, like these podcasts, they're free. Our next one is on electrical safety management, social housing, quite apt given kind of the update we've had out from the in terms of 5-year fixed testing for domestic properties and social housing. So please come along and join us there, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to speak to one of our in-house experts, please get in touch either via our website or across our social media pages. Pennington Choices, providing property surveying, consultancy and project management services to organisations nationwide. Our expertise, your solution.